Welcome to my channel, Rise Up with Steve. Please hit like, subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. Let me tell you something real. When a man can't get you out of his mind, it doesn't show up first. In big romantic speeches, it shows up in his behavior. A man may not always say what he feels, but he will always reveal it by what he does. Men are wired to protect what matters, invest in what matters, and pursue what they value. So when you're on his mind constantly, his actions change without you having to beg, remind, or chase. See, a man who's thinking about you all the time doesn't disappear for days and come back with excuses. He doesn't make you feel confused about where you stand. Instead, his presence becomes consistent. Even when he's busy, even when life is heavy, you'll still feel him checking in, staying connected, making sure you're okay. Why? Because when you're on a man's mind, peace doesn't come until he knows you're good. He remembers things, not just birthdays, but small details. Something you said weeks ago, a story you told once, your likes, your dislikes, your moods. And he doesn't remember because he's trying hard. He remembers because you live rent-free in his thoughts. When a man truly cares, your words stick with him. Another thing, he includes you in his future conversation. Maybe not with perfect clarity, but you'll hear it. We could do this someday. Next time we should. That's not accidental language. That's a man mentally placing you in his life ahead. Men don't plan futures around things they don't value. And let me say this clearly, a man who thinks about you all the time will protect the connection. He won't play games that risk losing you. He may not be perfect, he may mess up, but you'll see effort. You'll see him trying to fix things instead of running, because losing you would cost him peace. When a man is truly thinking about you all the time, you won't have to guess, decode messages, or read between the lines. The clearest sign is consistency, not grand gestures, not sweet words said once in a while, but steady presence. Because here's the truth. People make time for what matters to them. A man may be busy, stressed, tired, or overwhelmed, but if you stay on his mind, you will never feel forgotten. You might not hear from him every single minute, but you will feel a pattern, a rhythm, something solid you can lean on. See, inconsistency is usually confusion or convenience. A man who reaches out only when it suits him, only when he's bored, lonely, or needs attention, is not thinking about you all the time. He's thinking about himself. But when you are on his mind, he checks in even when he doesn't need anything from you, not to impress you, not to manipulate you, but because your presence brings him peace. He wants to know how your day went. He wants to make sure you're okay. That thought comes to him naturally, without effort. Consistency also shows emotional maturity. A man who values you understands that silence creates doubt. So even when he doesn't have long conversations to offer, he gives reassurance, a message, a call, something that says, I'm here. I didn't forget you. That's not weakness, that's intention. Men who care don't enjoy leaving women confused. They know confusion creates distance, and distance threatens connection. When you're always on a man's mind, he doesn't disappear during hard times. He doesn't go cold when life gets complicated. Instead, he may slow down, but he won't shut you out. There's a difference. Slowing down says, I'm dealing with things, but you still matter. Disappearing says you're optional. And a woman who stays on a man's mind is never optional. Another important thing is predictability, not boredom, but reliability. You know how he shows up. You know his communication style. You're not constantly wondering who you're going to get today, the warm version or the distant one. That emotional stability comes from care. A man who thinks about you understands that his actions affect your emotions, so he moves with more awareness. Consistency is also protection. When a man values you mentally and emotionally, he protects the connection by being steady. He doesn't test your patience just to see how much you'll tolerate. He doesn't play disappearing games to feel powerful. He understands that trust is built through repetition, not promises. Every time he shows up when he said he would, every time he follows through, every time he communicates instead of vanishing, he's telling you, You matter to me. And let me say this clearly, consistency doesn't mean perfection. He might miss a call. He might reply late sometimes. Life happens. But what never changes is his intent. You won't feel like you're chasing him. You won't feel like you're forcing connection. It flows because you're already in his thoughts. A man who keeps you on his mind all the time doesn't make you compete with silence. He doesn't make you feel like asking for basic communication is asking for too much. Instead, he gives it freely. Because when you're important, effort doesn't feel like work, it feels natural. So if a man's presence in your life feels steady, calming, and reliable, believe that feeling. That's not coincidence. That's consistency. And consistency is the loudest sign that you live in someone's mind long after the phone is put down. When a man is thinking about you constantly, one of the clearer signs is how deeply he listens and how much he remembers. This isn't about memorizing facts to impress you or recalling things because he feels obligated. It's about how your words settle into his mind and stay there. When you matter to a man, conversations don't disappear the moment they end. They echo. He carries pieces of what you said with him through his day. And they resurface naturally in the way he talks to you later. You'll notice that he brings up things you mentioned casually, things you didn't think were important enough to remember. A comment you made about your favorite food, a story about your childhood, something that made you nervous or excited. He doesn't ask you to repeat it. He doesn't act surprised when you mention it again. He already knows. And that's because when someone lives in your mind, their details become part of your mental landscape. You don't try to remember them. They're simply there. This kind of attention shows emotional presence. A man who listens carefully is mentally with you, not half present, not distracted, not waiting for his turn to speak. He absorbs what you say because your inner world matters to him. Your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, they register. And when he remembers, it's his way of saying, I see you. Not just on the surface, but underneath. You'll also see it in how he responds. He doesn't give generic answers or empty reactions. His responses reflect understanding. If you told him something made you uncomfortable, he avoids it later. If you shared something that made you happy, he brings it up again or tries to recreate that feeling. That's memory turning into care. That's thoughtfulness becoming action. Another powerful sign is when he checks on things you mentioned long ago. You told him you were nervous about an interview weeks back, and he asks how it went without you reminding him. You mentioned a family issue once, and he circles back to see how you're doing. That's not coincidence. That's mental investment. You stayed on his mind long enough for those moments to matter. Men don't do this accidentally. They remember what they value. When a man is emotionally engaged, your words carry weight. They influence how he moves. He becomes more aware of how he speaks to you, what jokes he makes, what topics he approaches gently. That awareness is rooted in memory, and memory is rooted in interest. There's also safety in this kind of attention. When a man remembers your boundaries, your sensitivities, and your needs, you feel emotionally protected. You don't feel like you have to keep explaining yourself or defending your feelings. He already knows. That sense of being understood creates a quiet bond that grows stronger over time. And here's something important. A man who remembers the small things is thinking about you even when you're not around. Memory doesn't activate only in conversation. It lives in the in-between moments. When he sees something that reminds him of you, hears a song you mentioned, or encounters a situation connected to something you shared, your presence returns to his mind without effort. That's how you know you stay there. Not because he says it, but because his awareness proves it. When your words shape his behavior, when your experiences stay with him, and when he remembers you without being prompted, it's clear you're not just passing through his life. You've taken up space in his thoughts, and that space doesn't disappear. When a man keeps you on his mind all the time, it begins to show in the way he talks about the future, even if he never calls it the future. Men don't always sit down and announce plans with perfect clarity, but they reveal their intentions through language. You'll hear yourself included in his tomorrow in small, natural ways. It won't feel forced or rehearsed. It will feel like he's already mentally placed you there. He starts using words that quietly connect you to what's coming next. We should go there sometime. Next time, let's do it this way. You'd love this. Those phrases might sound simple, but they carry meaning. A man doesn't imagine experiences with someone who doesn't live in his mind. He doesn't subconsciously plan with someone he sees as temporary. When you show up in his future talk, it means you've already taken root in his thoughts. This kind of language shows comfort and certainty. He's not just thinking about the moment he's in with you, he's imagining continuity. He sees you as someone who will still be around, someone whose presence extends beyond today. And men are careful about that. They don't casually project forward with people they're unsure about. When a man is unsure, he stays vague. When he's invested, he becomes specific. You may notice that he starts aligning his plans with you without making a big deal about it. He considers your schedule. He checks before committing to something. He thinks about how his choices might affect time with you. That's mental inclusion. He's not asking permission, he's acknowledging importance. Your place in his life has moved from optional to considered. Another sign is how he talks about possibilities. He might mention events, trips, or goals and naturally position you inside those conversations, not in a dramatic way, not with pressure, but with ease. That ease matters. It means the idea of you being there feels normal to him, comfortable, expected. This behavior also shows emotional security. A man who keeps you in mind feels safe enough to imagine forward. He's not afraid of attachment. He's already experiencing it mentally. And because men often process emotions internally before expressing them, this kind of future-oriented language is a major signal. He's already thought about you more than he's said. You'll also notice that he doesn't rush these conversations. He doesn't use the future to manipulate or promise things he can't back up. Instead, it shows up slowly, consistently, in everyday moments. That's how you know it's real. It's not a tactic. It's a reflection of where his mind goes naturally. When a man is constantly thinking about you, you become part of how he organizes his life mentally. Decisions are no longer made in isolation. Even small choices begin to pass through the filter of us, whether he says it out loud or not. That mental shift doesn't happen unless you matter deeply. So when you hear yourself included in his next, pay attention. Not because it guarantees anything, but because it reveals something important. It shows that when he looks ahead, you're already there. And people don't imagine futures with someone who doesn't stay in their mind long after the conversation ends. When a man thinks about you constantly, one of the strongest signs shows up in how he protects the connection between you. This protection isn't loud or dramatic. It doesn't always come with speeches or promises. Instead, it shows up in restraint, in effort, and in the way he chooses the relationship over his ego. A man who keeps you on his mind understands, even if he never says it out loud, that what he has with you is valuable, and valuable things are handled with care. You'll notice that he avoids behavior that could easily damage what you share. He doesn't intentionally push your buttons just to get a reaction. He doesn't disappear to test how much you care. He doesn't flirt recklessly or create unnecessary insecurity. That's because when you matter to a man mentally, the thought of losing you feels uncomfortable. He knows that one careless move could create distance, and distance threatens the connection he wants to keep. This kind of protection also shows in how he handles conflict. When issues come up, his instinct isn't to run, shut down, or punish you with silence. Instead, even if he struggles to express himself, you'll see effort. He may take time to process, but he comes back. He wants resolution, not dominance. That's a man who values peace with you more than being right. You'll also see it in how he speaks to you during difficult moments. He chooses his words more carefully. He may still get frustrated, but he doesn't cross lines easily. He understands that words linger. And because you stay on his mind, he doesn't want to be the source of your pain. That awareness is protection in its quietest form. Another sign is loyalty in everyday situations. Not just physical loyalty, but emotional loyalty. He doesn't entertain connections that threaten what you have. He doesn't give parts of himself to others that belong in your space. When a man is mentally invested, he naturally narrows his focus. His energy becomes selective because his mind is already occupied. Protection also looks like reassurance. He senses when you're uneasy, even if you don't say it directly. And instead of ignoring it, he addresses it. He may not have perfect words, but he doesn't leave you alone in your doubt. He understands that emotional security strengthens connection, and he wants that bond to grow, not weaken. What's important to understand is that this behavior doesn't come from fear, it comes from value. A man who is afraid may cling or control. A man who values you protects by being steady, respectful, and intentional. He doesn't need to guard you, he guards the relationship itself. When you live in a man's mind, he becomes more thoughtful with his actions. He pauses before doing things that could hurt you. He considers consequences. That pause is everything. It means you matter enough for him to think twice. So when you see a man choosing understanding over ego, effort over avoidance, and care over chaos, recognize it for what it is. That's not coincidence or personality, it's protection. And protection is one of the clearest signs that you occupy a permanent space in someone's thoughts. Expand 500 and 600 words. Remove headings and conclusions. When a man is thinking about you all the time, your feelings begin to influence the way he moves through the world, even when you're not physically present. This doesn't mean he loses himself or becomes controlled by emotion. It means your emotional reality matters enough to shape his choices. He starts to think before he acts, not out of fear, but out of consideration. That shift is subtle but powerful. You'll notice that he becomes more aware of how his words land. He may still joke, tease, or speak honestly, but there's a new layer of care underneath it. He considers whether something might hurt you, confuse you, or make you feel unimportant. When a woman lives in a man's mind, he doesn't speak recklessly to her because her emotional response matters to him. He understands that words can either build connection or damage it, and he doesn't want to be careless with something valuable. This influence shows up in his decisions too. He doesn't just do what feels good in the moment without thinking ahead. He pauses. He asks himself how a choice might affect you. Whether it's staying out late, going silent for days, or making plans that exclude you, he becomes more intentional. That pause is evidence that you're present in his thoughts. You've become part of his internal conversation. A man who constantly thinks about you also adjusts his behavior when he realizes something hurts you. Not with excuses, not with defensiveness, but with awareness. He may not get it right immediately, but he tries. He doesn't repeat the same careless behavior over and over once he understands its impact. That willingness to change isn't weakness, it's emotional investment. Men don't change patterns for people they don't care deeply about. You'll also see that he becomes more emotionally disciplined. He resists impulsive actions that could threaten what you share. Not because someone told him to, but because the thought of hurting you sits heavily with him. That weight only exists when someone occupies your mind. If a man doesn't think about you, your feelings don't slow him down. But when you matter, they do. Another important sign is how he responds to your emotional state. If you're stressed, distant, or quiet, he notices. And instead of ignoring it or dismissing it, he becomes more attentive. He may ask what's wrong, or he may simply be gentler with you. That sensitivity comes from mental presence. He's paying attention not just to what you say, but to how you feel. This influence doesn't mean he always agrees with you. It means he respects you. Even when there's disagreement, he tries to communicate instead of shutting down. He wants understanding more than control. He values emotional harmony because your peace affects his peace. When a man's actions begin to reflect awareness of your emotions, it's a clear sign you stay on his mind. Your feelings are no longer background noise, they're part of how he navigates life. And people don't give that kind of influence to someone they're not constantly thinking about. When a man is truly thinking about you all the time, effort shows up even when life is heavy, busy, or overwhelming. This is one of the most honest signs, because effort during ease is common, but effort during pressure reveals priority. A man may have responsibilities, stress, exhaustion, and distractions pulling at him from every direction. But if you stay on his mind, you won't disappear when things get hard. You may not get his best energy every day, but you will still get his presence. You'll notice that even on his busiest days, he finds a way to reach out. It might be short, it might be simple, but it's intentional. A message that says he's thinking about you. A quick call just to hear your voice. Check in that lets you know you haven't slipped off his radar. That's not about time management. It's about mental priority. When someone lives in your mind, they naturally surface even in chaos. A man who isn't thinking about you uses busyness as a reason to disconnect. Silence becomes easier than communication. But a man who carries you in his thoughts understands that absence creates distance. So he makes small but consistent efforts to stay connected. He doesn't let days stretch into uncertainty without explanation. He knows that emotional security matters. Effort during difficult times also looks like honesty. He doesn't pretend everything is fine when it's not. He lets you know when he's struggling, tired, or overwhelmed instead of shutting you out. That openness is effort. It takes energy to communicate rather than disappear. And men only spend that energy on connections that matter to them. You'll also see effort in how he adapts. If his schedule changes, he adjusts instead of abandoning the connection. If he can't give you time the way he usually does, he finds another way. That flexibility shows that you're not just fitting into his life. When it's convenient, you're being considered, even when it's complicated. Another sign is follow through. Even under pressure, he does what he says he will do. He might move slower, but he doesn't forget. He understands that broken promises create doubt, and doubt threatens connection. Because you're on his mind, he's careful with his word. What's important here is that this effort doesn't feel forced. He's not keeping score. He's not acting out of guilt. He's acting out of care. You can feel the difference. He feels steady, sincere, and calm rather than dramatic or inconsistent. When a man continues to show up emotionally during hard seasons, it's because you occupy space in his thoughts that stress can't erase. Life may demand his attention, but you still exist in his mind as someone worth holding on to. So if you see effort that doesn't vanish under pressure, believe it. That's not coincidence or luck, that's priority. And priority is one of the clearest signs that you stay in a man's mind, even when the world is demanding everything else from him.